In this video, we're going to explore the mysterious Waru Waru in Puno Peru on the altiplano next to Lake Titicaca. These strange and mysterious forms of enormous proportions can only fully be appreciated when viewed from the air. Before I talk more about them, I would first like to give you a tour so you have a better understanding of the information I'm going to present. Enjoy the trip. The term Waru Waru are of indigenous origin. Waru, spelled W-A-R-U, or Huaru, spelled H-U-A-R-U, is a suffix that in Aymara means high and deep. In Quechua language, the word denotes a basic construction that makes it possible to cross a watercourse or a rocky ground. According to a text titled The Andean Philosophical Thought originating in Rodolfo Kusch, written by Jaime Vargas Condor, the term Huaru can be used to describe the concept, the point of origin. Quote, Yamkui's worldview distinguishes that the world was first created in different times. That is, it is not a homogeneous action, but heterogeneous, as by ages. The principle of origin is the Ushnu in Quechua, or Huaru in Aymara, as the central axis that relates the deep with the high, or lofty in Pacha duality. The Waru Waru are not only perplexing and amazing to look at, they also used to serve a practical purpose. This is well described in an article written by Umar Sataur and was published in a magazine called New Scientist in 1990. The title states, quote, The Lost Art of the Waru Waru. Peruvian farmers are now rediscovering an ancient way of growing crops on the harsh high plains of the altiplano, end quote. The article goes as follows, quote, Surrounding Lake Titicaca on Peru's southern border with Bolivia is the altiplano, a vast plain 3,800 meters above sea level. Much of the land is pasture, but scattered here and there, for as far as the eye can see, are patches of corrugated land. Each patch is divided into long, narrow strips separated by furrows, some of which contain puddles of water. Closer inspection reveals that the tops of the strips are populated by dry, hardy grasses, whereas the vegetation in the furrows is lush and green. The local Quechua and Aymara farmers call these strange topographical features Waru Waru or camelones. Until 1981, however, The local farmers had no idea that these represented persisting evidence of the remarkable engineering and agricultural skills of their pre-Columbian ancestors. The soils of the altiplano are generally poor for agriculture. Cultivation is made more difficult because of the unpredictable climate. Rainy and dry seasons typically last 6 months each, but their duration can vary drastically. The severe drought of 1982 to 1983, for example, was followed by floods during 1983 to 1984. The level of water in Lake Titicaca can fluctuate by 0.5 meters to 4 meters. The high altitude makes the nights during the dry season bitterly cold, and frosts are common throughout the year. Given such difficulties, the early inhabitants of the altiplano must have worked hard to make such an area agriculturally productive. Ancient farmers dug parallel ditches, piling the soil between them to form long raised mounds. Their raised fields are between 4 to 10 meters wide and 10 to 100 meters long. Most are rectangular, but other shapes, such as crescents, are also found. The orientation of the fields are not consistent. The ditches are connected to some source of water. The high water table around the lake provided water for the ditches of raised fields close to the lake. Channels dug from rivers supplied those further back from the lakeside. The fact that raised fields cover some 82,000 hectares of land around the lake suggests that the ancient inhabitants of the altiplano had hit on a system that successfully tackled the considerable environmental constraints of farming the area. Archaeologists are now convinced that the Waru Waru were built specifically to protect crops from frost damage and floods. In 1981, Clark Erickson of the University of Illinois recognized the archaeological significance of Waru Waru, but he also wondered whether they might not serve modern Aymara and Quechua farmers as well as they did their ancestors. Erickson began to rebuild some of the raised fields. According to Jorge Reynoso, co-director of Peru's project on Andean agricultural systems, local farmers were skeptical at first. Skepticism turned to excitement and enthusiasm, however, when the farmers compared their yields from flat land with those from Erickson's renovated raised fields. Erickson employed Quechua farmers to reconstruct a raised field to specifications taken from an excavated field. The farmers used traditional Andean tools such as the chaki taglia or Andean foot plow to cut blocks of sod from the old ditches. Erickson wrote that, quote, traditional tools proved to be excellent implements ideally suited for the preparation of raised fields, end quote. They planted the experimental field with potatoes, quinoa, and canihua, two indigenous Andean grains. The yield of potatoes was more than 8 tons per hectare, compared with the average for the Puno district of 2 to 3 tons per hectare. This was true even though they added no fertilizers to the local potatoes they planted on the Waru Waru. Fertilizers are commonly used in the rest of the district. Perhaps the most significant advantage of the Waru Waru, though, are to do with producing the best conditions for growing crops in a harsh environment. In the severe floods of 1985, for example, the only crops that survived were those grown on raised fields. Potatoes are particularly prone to damage by frost and fare much better if grown on raised beds. Researchers now believe this is because the water in the ditches changes the microenvironment above the Waru Waru. The water absorbs the heat during the day and continues to release it during the night. The temperature above raised beds can be as much as 2.5 degrees higher than that on flat land. There are other advantages too. During short periods of drought, the ditches store enough water for the farmers to scoop up and splash onto the raised beds. In the dry season, Livestock graze the area between the ditches, and the ditches collect droppings and dead plant matter. When the rainy season is about to begin again, the farmers repair the Waru Waru, redigging the ditches and throwing the earth onto the raised bed, all of which improves the quality of the soil. According to Ignacio Garacochea, a Peruvian agronomist working in Puno district, the soils in the ditches are different from those in the flatland or on the beds on the tops of the Waru Waru. The ditches are richer in organic matter, nitrate and phosphorate compared to soil on the beds. The ditches act as a sink for organic debris whose decomposition enriches the soil with organic matter and nutrients. The organic acids produced by the decomposition of plant matter and dung lowers the soil pH, a valuable factor because high alkalinity is a problem for agriculture on the high plains. Researchers believe that in pre-Columbian times, the ditches would have been rapidly colonized by aquatic plants. The pre-Columbian farmers may also have supplemented the protein in their diets by raising fish in the deeper ditches. Since 1981, archaeologists have discovered fragments of Andean tuber crops and the bones of fish, llamas, guinea pigs and aquatic birds at rubbish mounds on sites inhabited in ancient times. Radioisotope dating suggests that the material was deposited between 1000 BC and AD 400. The raised fields did not yield enough material for carbon dating, but, according to Erickson, the age of pottery fragments from the raised fields correlates with the age of the material found in the rubbish mounds. Sifting through the dates given for various archaeological finds, Erickson believes that people began building raised fields around 1000 BC. Yet the Incas, who dominated the area after AD 1450, made little use of raised fields, and the Spanish conquistadors knew nothing of them when they arrived 100 years later. Why did farmers in the altiplano abandon such a successful system even before the Spanish arrived there? Some researchers blame radical changes in climate, long droughts or floods, too severe even for the Waru Waru to accommodate. Others suggest that geological processes such as tectonic uplift may underlie the abandonment of the system. Erickson, however, argues that the fields probably do as well today as they did in the past when challenged with droughts and floods. Evidence of raised fields on the floor of the lake suggests that ancient farmers adapted the system to suit the changing environment and would farm fields in many different locations. Erickson also notes that studies indicate that the average lake level, which should be a good indicator of geological shifts, has been relatively stable since the Pleistocene. His view is that the expansion and abandonment of the system is more to do with the rise and fall of various ceremonial centers in the area. Waru Waru increased productivity when the area was at its greatest socio-political importance. As its importance waned, so farmers cultivated fewer fields. Some 1,500 hectares of raised fields have been reconstructed. The Peruvian Department of Agriculture is convinced of the value of Waru Waru in increasing agricultural productivity in the Puno district. The government now offers loans to farmers to rebuild the fields. One farmers' cooperative borrowed from the government to rebuild a few fields and is so impressed by the improvements in yields that it plans to fund the rebuilding of more raised fields itself. That is the end of the article. In the article, Erickson states that, quote, evidence of raised fields on the floor of the lake suggests that ancient farmers adapted the system to suit the changing environment and would farm fields many different directions, end quote. Now I will show you an example of raised fields on the floor of the lake, not Lake Titicaca, but Lake Umayo, which is situated next to Lake Titicaca. Erickson also stated in the article, quote, "Studies indicate that the average lake level, which should be a good indicator of geological shifts, has been relatively stable since the Pleistocene." End quote. I'm not saying that these raised fields on the bottom of the lake must be from the Pleistocene. I just want to raise the question, when was the lake level low enough for these raised fields to be above the lake level? By going back in time in Google Earth, we can see that the shoreline of the lake has been relatively stable for the last 50 years. The article shows that archaeologists do have a good understanding of the practical function of the Waru Waru in agriculture. What I still find a mystery is the design of the circular-shaped Waru Waru that was shown in the beginning of the video. Were they made in this way simply to look aesthetically beautiful to the eye, or is there a deeper meaning coded into them? Near Tiwanaku there are also several Waru Waru, but one of them stands out from all the others I've shown in this video. It is located just 260 meters north of the Kalasasaya complex in Tiwanaku. This structure has the appearance of a labyrinth or maze. From what I can observe, it has 6 or 7 openings. Let's imagine that the purpose is to cross to the other side of the maze. If you use the openings marked with red, you will not be able to cross. If we try the opening on the southwest side, you will have to follow the green path in order not to get blocked by water canals. If you follow any of the red paths, you will be blocked. If we try the other openings, we can see the green path you need to take in order to cross to the other side. The shape it takes reminds me of a reversed Andean cross. If we color in everything but the green path, this becomes more clear. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I would also like to say thank you to Kallpa Travel for allowing me to use their excellent drone video.